Most men are not born emotionally distant. They become that way after life teaches them lessons they never wanted to learn, not in a single day, not after one failure, but after enough betrayals, enough broken promises, and enough moments where their loyalty was rewarded with abandonment. Slowly, the warmth they once carried begins to fade. So ask yourself this: what changed you? Was it the friend who disappeared when you needed him most, the woman who loved what you could provide but not who you were, or the painful realization that no one was coming to rescue you from your struggles? That moment changes everything. Most people mistake it for bitterness. They are wrong. It is awareness. It is the moment illusion dies and observation begins. Machiavelli understood a truth that many spend their entire lives avoiding. Human beings are rarely driven by fairness. More often, they are driven by self-interest. While you are valuable, you are celebrated. While you solve problems, people call you indispensable. But the instant you become a burden instead of a benefit, many quietly walk away without looking back. That discovery leaves a permanent mark on a man. He speaks less. He trusts more slowly. He stops wasting energy convincing people of his intentions because he realizes actions reveal more than explanations ever could. This is where real strength begins, not with anger, not with revenge, but with control. Like a predator waiting in silence, he learns that power rarely announces itself. It observes, it calculates, and when the moment is right, it acts without hesitation. Because the man who masters his emotions no longer reacts to the world. Eventually, the world is forced to react to him. Coldness is rarely born from hatred. It is born from clarity. A young man steps into the world believing honesty, loyalty, and sacrifice will earn him respect. For a while, he clings to that belief. Then reality begins its lessons. The woman he trusted walks away. The friends who once called him family disappear when he has nothing left to offer. Even those whose approval he chased continue to find reasons to criticize him. Nothing changes overnight. Each disappointment removes another illusion. Each betrayal hardens another corner of his heart. Until one day, the man who once wore his emotions openly becomes almost impossible to read. That is why the calmest men often command the most respect. They are not calm because life has been kind. They are calm because life has tested every weakness they once had. Machiavelli understood that reality rewards perception, not wishful thinking. Too many men judge others by their own values. They assume kindness creates kindness. It doesn't. The manipulator sees generosity as an opening. The opportunist mistakes patience for permission. The dishonest quietly searches for the cracks in your character while you are busy proving your good intentions. Eventually, you notice the pattern. Your smile becomes more reserved. Your trust becomes harder to earn. Your circle grows smaller but stronger. You stop giving everyone unrestricted access to your time, your energy, and your peace. Many mistake this transformation for cruelty. It isn't. It is the difference between reacting and observing, between chasing acceptance and protecting your value. Because real strength is not measured by how loudly you respond to the world. It is measured by how completely you remain in control when everyone else loses theirs. Most men don't lose because they lack talent. They lose because they surrender to emotions that last only a moment. One insult ruins their entire day. One rejection makes them question their worth. One heartbreak steals months, sometimes years of their focus. They hand over control without realizing it. Machiavelli understood something uncomfortable. The easiest man to manipulate is the one who cannot master himself. Think about it. Why does a manipulator provoke you instead of debating you? Why does a toxic person keep pressing your emotional buttons? Why does an opponent want your reaction more than your argument? Because the moment you react, they lead. You follow. A man who no longer needs validation becomes unpredictable. A man who can leave without begging, who can let go without chasing, who can endure temptation without surrendering to it becomes incredibly difficult to control. That is why pain changes some men forever. Heartbreak is more than emotional loss. It strips away illusion. It forces you to see people as they are instead of who you hoped they would become. And once reality replaces fantasy, there is no returning to innocence. Some men allow suffering to poison them. Others use it to sharpen themselves. That is the dividing line. The naive man keeps asking why people aren't better. The wise man stops asking and starts adjusting. He no longer fights reality. He learns to move with it. Strategy replaces emotion. Discipline replaces impulse. And over time, something remarkable happens. The coldest men often become the most relentless workers. Not because they stopped feeling, but because they stopped waiting for someone else to save them. The day a man accepts that responsibility belongs to him alone is the day he begins to build a life that no setback can easily destroy. The moment a man accepts that no one is coming to rescue him, everything changes. Complaining loses its purpose. Validation loses its value. He stops announcing his ambitions to people who secretly hope he fails. Instead, he lets his actions speak in silence. While others waste time chasing attention, he chases competence. While they seek comfort, he embraces discomfort. While they wait for opportunity, he prepares for it. Eventually, people notice the result. They call him distant, different, unrecognizable. What they never witnessed were the lonely nights, the repeated failures, and the quiet battles that shaped him. Machiavelli understood that suffering is never neutral. It either weakens your character or forges it into something far more resilient. Most men allow pain to define them. A rare few use it to redefine themselves. History remembers those men. Every man eventually faces the same question. Will pain become his excuse or his discipline? The weak search for escape. The strong search for growth. One blames circumstances. The other accepts responsibility. One waits for life to change. The other changes himself first. That is where true power begins. Here's the irony few people recognize. The coldest men are often the ones who once loved the hardest. The man who now guards his trust once gave it without hesitation. The man who now keeps his distance once welcomed everyone into his life. His reserve was not born from cruelty. It was born from experience. Pain did not create a new man. It revealed the man survival demanded. From that day forward, he stopped reacting to every emotion. He stopped chasing people who wanted to leave. He learned that emotional discipline is not the absence of feeling. It is the ability to decide which feelings deserve your attention and which deserve nothing at all. A man who no longer fears being abandoned cannot be controlled by the threat of loss. He stops chasing those who choose to leave. He understands that attachment without discipline slowly becomes dependence, and dependence always hands power to someone else. Machiavelli argued that respect endures where affection often fades. It sounds ruthless, but life proves the lesson again and again. Approval is fragile. It rises and falls with people's opinions. Respect is different. It is earned through consistency, discipline, and the willingness to stand alone. That is why powerful men stop asking to be liked. They choose to be respected instead. The moment a man becomes comfortable being misunderstood, he becomes remarkably difficult to manipulate. He no longer bends himself to satisfy every expectation. His presence changes. His words become measured. His movements become deliberate. He looks people in the eye without searching for acceptance because his confidence no longer depends on their approval. That is strength. Not loud voices, not expensive possessions, not empty displays of confidence. Real strength is remaining calm when chaos invites you to panic, staying focused while others question your path. Losing everything, yet refusing to lose yourself. Most people never notice when this transformation begins. They only notice the result. The man who once trusted everyone now trusts carefully. The man who once gave endlessly now gives with boundaries. They call him cold. They misunderstand him. He has simply learned that loyalty without limits becomes self-destruction. Endless sacrifice for those who never reciprocate is not virtue. It is misplaced generosity. And this is where every man reaches a crossroads. Pain creates two kinds of men. One becomes consumed by bitterness. The other turns pain into discipline and discipline into power. The path he chooses will determine not only who he becomes, but how the world will remember him. The bitter man lets pain become his identity. Every disappointment convinces him that everyone is the enemy. He builds walls so high that even the people who genuinely care can no longer reach him. In trying to avoid being hurt again, he ends up imprisoning himself. The disciplined man chooses differently. He doesn't close his heart. He protects it. He doesn't stop trusting. He simply becomes careful about who earns that trust. That is wisdom. Machiavelli never argued that a man should become emotionless. He argued that a man should understand human nature well enough to stop becoming its victim. There is a world of difference between those two ideas. The foolish man declares, "I'll never care again." The wise man quietly decides, "I'll care with discernment." That decision changes everything. After enough betrayal, a man's eyes begin to notice patterns that once escaped him. He recognizes who only appears when they need something, who disappears the moment his value declines, who celebrates his failures more enthusiastically than his victories, who offers smiles in public while quietly competing in private. Once those patterns become visible, they cannot be ignored. That is why truly strong men often appear reserved, not because they dislike people, but because they finally understand them. They stop demanding fairness from a world that has never promised it. They replace expectation with observation, and disappointment loses much of its power. From then on, words mean very little. Promises are effortless. Loyalty is expensive. Anyone can claim they believe in you. Anyone can call you family when life is easy. But pressure exposes character. Scarcity exposes intention. Adversity exposes loyalty. So watch carefully. When your success disappears, who remains? When your value seems uncertain, who still stands beside you? Those answers will teach you more about human nature than 1,000 comforting speeches ever could. Pay attention to what people do when your value seems to disappear, when you fail, when you stop solving their problems, when you no longer have something they want. That is where masks begin to fall. Reality is revealed not during comfort, but during hardship. And reality is often colder than most men expect. That is why so many men become cold themselves. Not because they enjoy distance, but because experience leaves them no other choice. Nothing destroys a man faster than living on false hope. Hoping someone will become different after repeatedly showing you who they are. Hoping loyalty is always repaid with loyalty. Hoping effort alone guarantees respect. Life dismantles these illusions, one painful lesson at a time, until the emotional boy slowly disappears, replaced by a man who thinks before he trusts. Then comes another transformation. Silence. This is where discipline begins to separate itself from weakness. Weak men constantly announce their ambitions. They defend themselves against every accusation. They seek reassurance from people who have already decided not to understand them. Every explanation gives away another piece of power. Strong men choose another path. Machiavelli understood that what remains hidden is far harder to attack. The fewer people know about your fears, your plans, and your next move, the fewer opportunities they have to interfere. Privacy is not secrecy born from fear. It is strategy born from wisdom. A disciplined man no longer feels compelled to reveal everything. He stops oversharing, stops arguing for approval, stops trying to convince others of his value. He lets time speak. He lets results speak. And results have a way of silencing every opinion that words never could. At first, solitude feels like punishment. The silence is uncomfortable. Empty spaces magnify every doubt. A man who has always depended on attention mistakes loneliness for failure. But if he stays there long enough, something unexpected happens. He adapts. The silence that once frightened him becomes a source of clarity. His own company becomes enough. And the moment a man no longer fears being alone, he becomes remarkably difficult to manipulate. Why? Because manipulation feeds on need. It targets the man who is terrified of rejection, desperate for approval, or unwilling to let people walk away. Fear makes him predictable. Desperation makes him obedient. But a man who has learned to stand comfortably by himself makes decisions from reason, not anxiety. That is the man Machiavelli admired. Not the loudest, not the most aggressive, the most disciplined. Real strength is not the absence of emotion. It is the refusal to let emotion make your decisions. Anyone can lose control. Anyone can react in anger. Anyone can say something they regret. That requires no discipline at all. Remaining calm when pressure rises, that is rare. And rarity creates power. Look closely at the men who consistently prevail. They rarely panic in public. They don't allow temporary frustration to sabotage long-term objectives. They understand that one careless reaction can undo years of steady progress. One unhealthy attachment can steal their focus. One emotional outburst can reveal weaknesses that others will gladly exploit. Life is not always fair. Loyalty is sometimes betrayed. Deception is sometimes rewarded. The disciplined man accepts this reality without surrendering to it. He cannot control the world, but he can always control himself. And that is where lasting power begins. A strong man accepts reality instead of arguing with it. That single decision changes the course of his life. But the deepest transformation comes later. It arrives the day he realizes that sympathy is temporary while usefulness is remembered. As a boy, he believed effort alone would earn love. As a man, he discovers that the world responds far more consistently to value than to emotion. That lesson is painful, but it is liberating. Instead of chasing acceptance, he begins building himself. He develops skills that cannot be taken away. He strengthens his body, sharpens his mind, expands his knowledge, and disciplines his emotions. Because value creates leverage, and leverage creates freedom. A man who depends on others for stability lives in constant uncertainty. A man who depends on himself carries a different kind of presence. He enters a room without needing attention. He listens more than he speaks. He observes more than he performs. Ironically, that quiet confidence earns more respect than desperate effort ever could. Human nature has always worked this way. The more you seek approval, the less valuable you appear. The less you need it, the more others begin to notice you. Machiavelli understood that mystery protects power. You do not reveal every plan, every emotion, or every weakness. Not because you are dishonest, but because wisdom knows that transparency without judgment becomes vulnerability. Yet one final lesson remains. Emotional distance alone is not strength. Anyone can become numb after enough disappointment. Anyone can withdraw from the world. But discipline is something entirely different. It allows a man to remain calm without becoming cruel, guarded without becoming bitter, and powerful without losing his character. That is the rare transformation few men ever achieve. The strongest man is not the one who feels nothing. He is the one who refuses to let his feelings take command. Beneath every calm face is often a battle no one witnessed, a betrayal never fully explained, a humiliation quietly endured, a heartbreak carried in silence, a season that nearly shattered everything he believed about himself. Yet he kept moving. He did not build an identity around his suffering. He built discipline from it. That is what people mistake for coldness. In reality, it is adaptation. Just as relentless heat strengthens steel, relentless hardship reshapes a man. He becomes slower to trust wiser with his time and far more careful about where he invests his loyalty. Not because he fears people, but because he finally understands them. Truth does that. It strips away comforting illusions until only responsibility remains. The hardest lesson every man must face is simple. No one is coming to rescue you. It sounds harsh, yet it is strangely freeing. The moment you stop waiting for someone else to change your life, you reclaim the power to change it yourself. That is where excuses end. Machiavelli understood that power favors disciplined men, not the most emotional, not the most gifted, the most consistent. The man who continues when motivation disappears, who keeps his promises when nobody is watching, who carries disappointment without allowing it to dictate his next decision. Life has always rewarded that kind of man. Because emotions rise and fall like the tide, discipline remains. Feelings ask for comfort. Discipline demands action. And over time, the man who acts regardless of how he feels, quietly distances himself from those who only move when inspiration happens to visit. The disciplined man stops bargaining with his emotions. He no longer asks whether he feels motivated. He asks what the situation demands. That single shift separates ordinary men from exceptional ones. Feelings change by the hour. Consequences remain for years. One impulsive purchase creates months of regret. One angry reaction destroys relationships built over decades. One reckless decision made for temporary pleasure can quietly sabotage an entire future. Machiavelli understood that before a man can lead anything, he must first govern himself. Look around. Most people are ruled by impulses they mistake for freedom. Desire pulls them in one direction. Anger pushes them in another. Fear keeps them standing still. They believe they are making choices when in reality, their emotions are making them. The disciplined man breaks that cycle. He controls himself before he attempts to control his circumstances. And the man who cannot be ruled by his impulses becomes remarkably difficult for anyone else to influence. That is where real power begins. It is rarely learned through comfort. It is forged after enough disappointments, enough sleepless nights, questioning misplaced loyalty, and enough painful moments realizing that kindness without boundaries often invites exploitation instead of respect. Eventually, he changes. Those who benefited from his old behavior rarely celebrate that transformation. The moment he stops chasing approval, stops tolerating disrespect, and starts protecting his time, some people call him arrogant. They misunderstand what they are seeing. They are not witnessing pride. They are witnessing standards. Growth often feels lonely because not everyone is willing to grow with you. Those who once profited from your weakness will resist your strength. But the man who accepts solitude, who is willing to walk away rather than betray himself, possesses a freedom that no one can easily take away. The man who depends on nothing is the hardest man to control. Dependency turns fear into a prison. The employee afraid to lose his paycheck accepts disrespect. The boyfriend terrified of being alone accepts manipulation. The friend who fears isolation forgives betrayal again and again. Fear keeps weak men obedient. Strong men do not eliminate fear. They master it. They act according to reason, even when fear whispers otherwise. That is courage. Over time, another truth becomes impossible to ignore. People rarely respect the man they can control emotionally. The one who constantly seeks attention is easily overlooked. The one who endlessly chases approval slowly loses his value. The one who always pursues is eventually taken for granted. But the man who remains composed commands attention without asking for it, not because he is distant, because he is centered. His emotions are no longer available for everyone to manipulate. His calm creates uncertainty. His discipline creates presence, and presence has a quiet authority that noise can never imitate. That is why emotionally disciplined men often become magnetic. Not through cruelty, not through arrogance, but through stability. In a world full of emotional chaos, the man who cannot be easily shaken becomes the one everyone notices and very few can influence.